Hi, this is Dr. Marks, and today we're going to be talking about palm oil. First, I want to tell you that the Palm Oil Action Group is very involved in trying to promote a better understanding of palm oil, both the kind of pros and the cons of palm oil. I have used some of their materials that were available at their website. I've added my own specific information about Central America and Costa Rica. I've added more data and some pictures to make this a little bit more appropriate for our class today. But I do want to acknowledge that some of this material is from palmoilaction.org. First, palm oil is obtained from the fruit of the African palm tree. So if you look at the picture there, you've got this very palm-looking tree. You've seen trees that look like that in Florida, but you've probably not seen palm oil trees. So look at the brown kind of cluster of nuts. That's basically the palm oil fruit, and you're going to see in some other pictures that they harvest kind of this big, conical kind of shaped mass, and it's got a bunch of those palm oil fruits, and that's how they process the oil. First, we should acknowledge that it's the most widely produced edible vegetable oil in the world. So it is referred to as a vegetable oil, but then there's some other statistics that might get a little confusing because we're going to compare palm oil to vegetable oil. And when we do, we're talking about the more traditional types of vegetable oils that we think of. But it is indeed a vegetable oil. In 2008, palm oil accounted for over a third of the 130 million tons of vegetable oil produced globally. So you need to just recognize, don't worry about the data so much, but 1/3, over a third. It can produce between 8 to 10 times more oil per hectare per year than any of the other oil seeds that we're used to thinking about. So rapeseed, soybean are commonly used, but the productivity of palm oil is enormous. It has an output to energy ratio of 9:1. And if we compare it to other oilseed crops, again, rapeseed oil, soybean oil, 3:1. So it's highly productive. It's very efficient. It emits 8 to 10 times more oxygen and absorbs up to 10 times more CO2 per hectare per year than other annual crops grown in these types of temperate climates. So you get an idea that this is a really productive crop, and it does some things that are good for the environment. It also requires less fertilizer per unit of output than other crops. So, when you think about the environment, it can really be benefited from palm oil, but there's more to the story. So what are the economic advantages of moving into palm oil? Well, lots of money. In Indonesia, palm oil generated almost $8 billion in 2007, and I haven't updated this data, and I apologize. But again, enormous profits to Indonesia from palm oil. That was 13% of agricultural output, second only to rice. So in Indonesia, palm oil is number 2, and it may have moved to number 1. I'm not sure if we updated this data. In Malaysia, also a big palm oil producer, in 2008, it accounted for $19.6 billion, so almost $20 billion in Malaysia. So what are the economic advantages? Highly profitable, and that's why we're seeing a lot of palm oil production in Southeast Asia. Indonesia, Malaysia, you're going to see reference to those more than once in this presentation. So let's look at the data graphically. Now, I realize that you've got a lot of years here on the horizontal axis. This data goes from 1964 to 2008, and this is just for Indonesia and Malaysia, again, 2 of the biggest players in palm oil. And what you see is that palm oil production has gone way up. Indonesia's in blue, Malaysia's in red, very similar patterns, aggressive growth in palm oil. Well, why might that be? Let's look at the financial returns. In blue, we've got the palm oil price. The other one is soybean. We're not that interested in it. But if we drew a line from the start of the data to the end of the data, there would be an upward slope. Now, look at the way that we're measuring this data on the vertical axis. So this is a really big rate of return. We're going from basically 0 to getting close to 200% increase. So in just a short period of time, because this data is basically going from 2002 to modern day, we're seeing huge increases in palm oil prices. Well, obviously, if palm oil prices are going way up, we're going to see the returns from growing palm oil going up. Now, one caveat. we should note that if you look at around 2008, 2009, we see a big decline in palm oil prices. Well, remember, what's going on in 2008/2009? Global financial crisis. So we probably don't want to infer that there was something going on specific to palm oil that led to that decline. It's probably more of a function of the global financial situation. Now, in Costa Rica, palm oil is also significant, but it's got a smaller impact than some other crops. However, the impact is growing, so the potential to generate big returns to palm oil is there in Costa Rica. They are starting to take advantage of it. Now, other Central American countries, same thing. We're starting to see production of palm oil. So while a lot of the discussion related to palm oil is Indonesia and Malaysia, they're kind of the worst offenders when we think about the downside of palm oil, it's important for us to acknowledge that Central American countries are also involved in palm oil. So let's look at palm oil in Central America. And this is a little bit harder to read because I know the numbers are really, really small. But we see a little bit of activity in the 60s. We really start seeing palm oil grow starting in the 80s. So if you look at where we really start to see this data measured as vertical yellow bars, we start seeing that in the mid to late 80s, seeing lots of growth. So this right here is quantity of palm oil exported. So Central America is starting to see big growth in palm oil, although the total level of exports doesn't compare yet to Indonesia and Malaysia. I think this data is from 2006, although the source I was using made it was a little unclear, but I think it's 2006 data. So let's look at who are the players in palm oil in Central America. At the top of the list, you see Honduras, then Guatemala, Costa Rica's number 3. But note that we see Mexico and Nicaragua, Panama, the Dominican Republic. So we're starting to see a lot of activity in Central America in palm oil. Costa Rica too, but they are not the biggest producer. The palm oil industry is driven by the high demand in the export markets. We know that, when demand remains high for palm oil, it's going to keep palm oil profitable, and it's going to keep countries like Costa Rica involved in palm oil. The world demand for palm oil is expected to continue to increase. It's forecasted about an average of 4% a year, and that may be a modest forecast. We may have actually realized higher returns in terms of increases than 4% a year, but still, if you have an industry growing by 4% a year, that's very healthy. Palm oil is in a lot of the foods we eat. I just took a sample of foods that are on the list of foods that contain palm oil. You see it in Ben & Jerry's ice cream. You see it in Girl Scout cookies. You go to get a fast food hamburger at Burger King, and you're going to have palm oil. Kit Kat, which you're going to see a little bit more about in just a few minutes. Palm oil is also in a lot of the daily products we use, cosmetics, soaps, lotions. It's really hard for us to escape palm oil. It really, truly is everywhere. In order to meet increasing demand for palm oil, it's anticipated that an additional 3 million hectares of new palm oil estates are going to have to be planted. Now that's from 2001, so keep in mind that that piece of data is a little bit older, but bottom line, research suggests that we're not going to see anything except for an increase in the demand for palm oil, which means we're not going to see anything except for an expansion of palm oil plantations. Approximately 1.6 million hectares of lowland forest in Sumatra and 2.6 million in Borneo has already been approved for clearance. This is from 2007. Now, Sumatra and Borneo are rich with biodiversity. They're places that you might go if you were interested in kind of natural tourism. Borneo is home to the proboscis monkey and the orangutan. A lot of it is very wild. So when we saw this, when Sumatra and Borneo decided that they were going to start clearing land to grow more palm oil, that really raised a lot of red flags. And that's why organizations such as Palm Oil Action, they're getting involved in this fight against expansion of palm oil. We'll talk more about that. European countries have promoted the use of palm oil by investing millions of dollars into national subsidies towards biodiesel. So palm oil is being used in biodiesel. As we invest more in biodiesel, and as we see that palm oil is a good source of, materials for biodiesel, this is only going to continue. So here's a picture of what's happened in Sabah. Sabah is in Malaysian Borneo. So if you know anything about your geography, you've got Southeast Asia, you've got Thailand, then you've got Malaysia, then you've got Singapore in that little tip of the peninsula. Then you go across the water to an island, which is Borneo, and Borneo is split between Malaysia and Indonesia. So you've got Malaysian Borneo, you've got Indonesian Borneo. So in Sabah, we're seeing a lot of environmental damage being caused by clear cutting of land. Why are they doing it? To grow palm oil. Palm oil plantations are more often established on primary forests as opposed to taking over pre-existing croplands. So that's one of the problems. So to expand palm oil, we're seeing them cut down forests, and that's certainly an issue. One of the reasons is that companies generate revenue from the sale of timber. So if you can go into a primary forest, clear cut it, sell off the timber, you can make a lot of money. That can be used to subsidize the palm oil expansion. Of course, we've already talked about that this contributes to climate change. I don't need to go into that much about the bad side of deforestation. Palm oil production has resulted in mass deforestation, social upheaval, we'll talk more about that, and the near extinction of several animal species. You hear a great deal about this in Southeast Asia. Again, big offenders, Malaysia, Indonesia, and of course the island of Borneo is where we're seeing a lot of this impact. Species that are now endangered include the Sumatran tiger, the Sumatran orangutan, and the Bornean orangutan. Companies often force local communities to give up their traditional lifestyle, and often without compensation. The process is facilitated by regional governments who convince local people to surrender their land and participate in company activities. So you might be wondering, why would a government do that? Well, think about it. It's going to create jobs. It creates economic activity. So there are some wins associated with palm oil. But as we know, there's also some problems associated with it when we see mass deforestation. The Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil has gotten involved in trying to promote sustainable palm oil production. They were established by the World Wildlife Fund in 2002. It's a nonprofit, multi-stakeholder organization. It's comprised of palm oil producers, manufacturers, retailers, banks, investors, and NGOs, which is non-governmental organizations. There are now over 500 members from more than 25 countries, and that comes from 2009, probably even higher if we were able to get data from 2012. RSPO members account for approximately 35% of the palm oil produced worldwide as of 2007, and that's only grown, and I'll give you some data on that. So in 2007, more than a third of kind of palm oil production was affiliated with this Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. So that's the good news. Now, among the principles of RSPO are transparency, compliance with local, national, and international ratified laws and regulations, use of best practices by growers and millers, environmental responsibility, and appropriate labor practices. In July of 2009, 4% of the palm oil produced was RSPO certified. That may not seem like a lot, but certainly a good start, and we're seeing increases there. By January 2010, RSPO certified plantations were able to supply 1.76 million tons of sustainable palm oil, and that's up in just a year from the previous statistic that I show you of 1.5 million tons. So again, you don't need to worry about the specific numbers, just understand that we are seeing an increase in RSPO certified palm oil. Now, one criticism is that some of the criteria for being certified as sustainable are still weak because they lack an operational meaning, and they're difficult to monitor and to audit. But again, it's a good stepping stone, it's a good starting point, and some of these problems will be worked out as they find better ways to kind of operationalize this idea of sustainable palm oil. Now, in 2008, according to the data that I have found, 16 palm mills were certified as sustainable. by the RSPO. In 2012, this was up to 175 palm mills. So we're seeing huge increases in certified palm oil. So that's really good news. If we look at total sales of certified sustainable palm oil in 2008, and I don't know what units these are, maybe it's tons, but the data wasn't very clear. But whatever unit this is, if it's 4,452 tons, it was up to 2.3-ish million by 2012. So we're seeing huge increases in just a short period of time. So the solutions, what are they? Clearly, they're going to be tied to supply and demand. The organization suggests that we need to insist that all makers clearly label palm oil on their products. So if you use palm oil in your candy, in your cookies, in your shampoo, that you should be required to indicate whether or not it uses palm oil. That we should pressure manufacturers to source only sustainable palm oil. Now that's, a really big goal, because palm oil that's sustainable may not be quite comparable in price. So if manufacturers are worried about profits, which of course they are, this would be like asking them to, raise their prices a little bit, which hurts consumers, which means they might sell a little less, which hurts their profit margins. But again, there is indeed a trade-off. Pressure supermarkets to pressure their suppliers to become certified, and pressure importers to transport more sustainably grown palm oil. So again, lofty goals. If we could accomplish these things, then we would be moving much further in the direction of sustainable palm oil production, and ultimately that's the goal. Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions, let me know. And be ready for a quiz.